My parents met at the AAC Arctic Research Facility on the southern shore of Kongsberg in 2048. Based at the research facility were a handful of scientists employed to continually research climate change. The scientist in charge at the time was my dad, Dr. James Fielding. My mom, Catherine, was on her first assignment and said she detested my dad on site. She only warmed up to him when she found out that he had attended the same college in Miami, graduating just 3 years earlier than her. It seemed ironic that she traveled all the way from the United States to the tiniest corner of Norway to meet a very rare species indeed, a fellow Miamian. For the Miami genus dwindled continually from the daily changes on the Earth. By that time, in the 40s, Miami was almost totally underwater. And the main reason both of my parents had felt compelled to study climate change. They said it was their vain attempt to reverse the inevitable, the rising tides. A few years later, in 2051, my parents had returned to the United States to stay with family in Washington, D.C., while Mom was pregnant, but without realizing that it may have been better to have stayed in Kongsberg. I was born Lola Freya Fielding on a warm sunny day, which was unusual. Unusual because it was late December. The past 5 years had seen only a fraction of previous expectations of snow in Washington, D.C., and this year was no different. D.C. winters were becoming like mild summers. It was very clear. The earth was heating up. The streets had become unsafe at all times, night and day, due to homelessness, poverty, and sickness. Vector-borne diseases, illnesses transmitted by mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas were now an international public health concern, and despite the ever-growing population, these diseases cause significant human deaths every year. We barely ventured out of the house. In a twist of fate, AAC Arctic had been in touch with my dad and had asked him back to their research facility in Kongsberg. Dad was keen to take the post, but my mom wanted me to have a different childhood. A normal one, well, as close to normal as possible. So they compromised, taking the bold step to relocate in the heart of a village in Scotland. My parents bought a small cottage in Speenbridge. It had stunning views of Onnock Moor, the Grey Curry Mountains, and around an acre of land. But most importantly, it was 57 meters above sea level. Dad came home every other week. He spent week on and week off, which meant I got to see more of him than if he had taken a regular job. Mom and Dad bought goats, pigs, chickens, and geese. They planted vegetables in an orchard. For me, it was heaven, and that was all that mattered to them. But the earth was hurt. I would listen to my parents discussing the findings that Dad brought home so we could run them past my mom for a second opinion. Aquafix Development Corporation, a big multi-global company that tried to stabilize the ground, improving the soil by extracting the water by pumping groundwater. At first, it seemed like the world had a solution, and ancient cities like Osaka were redeemed. They built upon sand and found this method counterproductive when the tectonic plates moved during earthquakes, and those bright, shiny new buildings collapsed into the sea. It seemed that in the long run, this remedy had caused more damage, ostensibly speeding up the hydrologic cycle so that those areas covered by snow and sea ice diminished faster. The subtropics dried up. In effect, the melting process moved into warp speed and created neoteric problems. Everywhere the weather raged. Storms, floods, heat waves, earthquakes, and tsunamis. It felt like the earth was crying out. Despite many countries planning ahead, the rising sea levels and the changing climate razed many of the ancient cities to the ground. So it was that the likes of Alexandria and the Nile Delta breathed its last breath, giving way to the surging tides of the Mediterranean, lost forever. The once icy wastes of Alaska were now green and pleasant, along with the peaks of Mont Blanc and most of the Alps. The Dead Sea was a thing of fable, as was the Great Barrier Reef, bleached to nothing but a watery graveyard. Beaches disappeared in Brazil, the Maldives, and many other archipelagos vanished into the ocean, never to be seen again. The evacuation from these last places caused the cities and countries to heave and swell with the new residents, as they were the closest or the easiest for migration. The old residents grew angry at the new residents, blaming them for crime, lack of food, jobs, and anything that was going wrong. And the queues. There were always queues. People were hungry. Many were starving, but others languished. Those privileged and wealthy residents looked down from their ivory towers to scoff, watching and loathing, waiting for the masses to die. Finally, in the year 2052, each and every nation was summoned to attend the Global Action Summit meetings. And this time every nation turned up. Further climate meetings were convened, but it was too late. There was no longer a solution. The news was grave. Our only option was to find a new home, a new world, somewhere we could start again. Well, for some of us. And so the race was on. We had less than half a century to find a new planet, a planet that was like Earth. But how could any planet be like Earth? What had we done? Astronomers were employed to find a needle in a haystack. Hundreds were employed and hundreds of exoplanets were discovered beyond our solar system, ranging in size from rugged Earths to planets the size of Jupiter. Most were unsuitable, so the search continued. That was until the Lippershade telescope, owned by an organization called Column Space, found a new planet orbiting a very bright star in a habitable zone of stars other than our Sun. They called it Koi 15. Column Space was the brainchild of Simon Cole, a multi-billionaire who threw his billions around developing a spacecraft to travel the solar system, enabling the bone idle and the fabulously wealthy to trip the light fantastic. It was a shrewd move, for he further lined his pockets, enabling Column Space to continue to research and develop. With further investigation and successful testing, the ongoing missions were being taken seriously by the larger aerospace companies such as Galaxia and Aerotime. Simon was dubbed as a genius, worthy of note in the history books. On his spacecraft, the Juno B was able to make repeat journeys, unlike their predecessor rockets and shuttles. Simon announced the trips to space were to become available to more of us, because he was able to keep costs lower, thus opening up space travel to even those who had just a small fortune. Column Space made a bid to lead the first voyage to Koi 15. As no other companies had technology to match it, it was agreed that Simon Cole and his Column Space crew could head off to Koi 15. Cole proudly unveiled their multi-carrier craft named Galilei. On September 20, 2055, Galilei was equipped with cargo and around 50 passengers, an envoy of mainly scientists that included a team of astronomers, agronomists, astrophysicists, astrobiologists, geographers, geologists, meteorologists, microbiologists, marine biologists, botanists, cytologists, epidemiologists, seismologists, and ethologists. Their intention was to study and collect information endeavoring to match climate, terrain, atmosphere, like for like with Earth. It was a 2-year mission. Solar panels would be erected to aid with the power and assist with the return trip. Column Space aimed to refuel on liquid methane and oxygen from Koi 15, which would then allow Galilei its return to Earth. TV, mobile phones, iPads, tablets, the internet, and every other visual medium was wrapped when Galilei blasted into the unknown.
Live for the moment, live for today. Every day, keep going on. Give all you've got, don't repair. After you
27 days later, Galilei arrived safely. Like a reality TV show of old, the world watched on as history was made and civilization began its reboot on Koi 15. Over the next 6 months, those on Earth waited with anticipation. On August 18, 2057, a month ahead of schedule, Galilei returned successfully to Earth. Cole attended a press conference and said he was confident that Koi 15 was habitable, and he would aim to make it cheap enough for most people to sell their home on Earth and relocate there. In a Parthian shot, Cole joked, and if they don't like it, there's a return ticket thrown in for free. Another scheduled mission was undertaken in 2058. Galilei and its original intrepid explorers were joined by a new craft, Galileo. Galileo was filled with architects, construction workers, civil engineers, city planners, communication and IT engineers, urban managers, and social contractors, all eager to build the first city on Koi 15. Aurora. Aurora was a humble city of a mere 300 houses overlooking Lake Otovie, all within walking distance of its local amenities. The individual plots were substantial and were priced at $20 million per property. Surprisingly, Column Space already had a waiting list for the next build project, which was not scheduled until 2062.
This is our fresh new day, dawn of brightness, illuminating, you can't look away, surrounded by lightning. Just look into our eyes, you can see the belief that what was lost is now redefined. Immaculate living, we came so far, now we're starting again. We'll change, we'll learn, all from where we have been. Starting out in our new lives under Aurora sky.
On 1 January 2061, the first mass exodus of Earth commenced. A fleet of 100 spacecraft, modeled and refined upon the blueprint of the Galilei, took the first pioneers to the New World. The boarding fee was a paltry $5 million. The Moribus fleet was unlike the Galilei, in that it had accommodated just 30 passengers in complete luxury. Again, those who had not looked on while those who had left the mess behind. As time marched on, the population of Koi 15 grew slowly. The Moribus fleet was retired and the Acacia Armada was rolled out. The Acacia vessels catered for those who could not afford the hefty $5 million a ticket price tag. Acacia tickets were priced at $1 million for second-class travel and packed onto a ship of 75 passengers. The Acacia Armada was destined for the new city of Sondives, overlooking the rugged coast of Chutes. The houses were far smaller than the elite Aurora mansions, but still only affordable to those with $5 million in their bank account. Still, the world continued to spin into disaster, but the subterfuge of the Exodus kept the masses from revolting. Cole promised to release further fleets of spaceships for the hoi polloi. It was cattle class and an extortionate price of $350K, but in true Willy Wonka style, there were free tickets up for grabs. After all, Koi 15 needed workers to support the ever-growing infrastructure. The rail and the roads needed to be laid, raw materials would not mine themselves, but more importantly, the rich needed staff. The Picana ships were made quickly and in bulk to accommodate the needs of the wealthy. 300 Picana vessels were docked, waiting to take poverty-stricken Earthlings to a new life. But this start was not pleasant. 195 days locked in a basic interior. Each cabin housed 6 bunk beds with a total of 250 spaces in each ship. The free tickets handed out to those lucky few were like the 17th century slave ships. The Picana 13, Picana 28, the Pecana 66 forced 10 bunks into a cabin. The free ticket stated that no luggage could be brought aboard except for one small carry-on bag. Passengers must leave with what they were wearing, so that when they arrived, they were forced into mining, laboring, waiting, and subserviency. The new world had regressed in its tolerance, and the gap between the classes had widened. But the view of the desperately impoverished was that they were free to live and breathe clean, fresh air with a whole new world of possibilities within their grasp. Meanwhile, back on Earth, there were food and water shortages. Despite a rationing system across the world, people lost all sense of morality in search of a meal or clean water, as the black market thrived on stolen goods and a new system of currency ensued. As more of the population left, the global economy began to falter. Those with money who had chosen to linger on Earth, hedging their bets, now found that the value of their property and monetary wealth was dissolving at a rapid rate, leaving them without enough capital to buy property in the new world. Time was running out. There was widespread water shortages, along with famine and disease. Atmospheric carbon dioxide levels increased faster than nature could deal with it, which attributed to the radical changes in the Earth's landscape. The Earth was losing plants and species vital to its existence. Thanks to my parents, I was well cared for. We had food, the sea levels had risen, but we were not affected. Although temperatures had risen over the year, we still had winters, and those winters were cold. Fleeting snowstorms were short but came often, which meant the ground grew hard under the ice, making it difficult for wildlife and our animals to graze. There was less rainfall, and our once luscious garden looked barren. Earth now had an apocalyptic feel. I remember watching the World Service News and listening to one of the last remaining scientists talking about the inevitabilities. It made me shudder.
When the Arctic melts, you alter everything in how the Earth works. Without ice to reflect that heat back into space and seawater absorbing solar radiation, we have created a vicious circle, and temperatures are not slowing but speeding up.
Those that had stayed or were left were either revolting in riots or dying. If the heat did not kill them, the cold did. If starvation did not kill them, then the viruses were waiting in the wings to finish the job. Instability was widespread. There was death and fighting everywhere. I was scared. I confessed this to my parents. They reassured me, but I could see the fear behind their eyes. Our food portions becoming meager. There had been strangers and stragglers upping the hills, and one of our pigs, along with some geese, had been taken. Dad stayed at home because Mum was not feeling comfortable being alone without him. I felt her fear. We still had a fair amount of water, but it was running low. The loch being our only source, we distilled it ourselves and stored it, but some of the animals got sick and dehydrated when the heat became unbearable. The winter that followed was cold, and a few more of our animals died, so Dad had to walk into the village to buy food for the first time in a long while. He came back with very little poultry and insufficient provisions, but we made do. It was a time of confusion and uncertainty. We held on and hoped for a glimmer of light, but it did not come. My parents rallied and tried to reassure me that things would get better, but I was scared and tired. I seemed always to be hungry and thirsty now. I barely attended school. Half of the class had vanished, and the other half eyed me strangely. They continually asked me about our animals and what food we had, so Mum said I could stay at home. It was not until the acidification of the oceans that my dad suggested that it was time for us to leave too. He had tears in his eyes when he showed us the screen. Black depths that once roared in turquoise majesty now sat empty and lifeless like outer space. Anaerobic bacteria from hydrogen sulfide had taken over the waters. My dad said that we could no longer visit the sea or oceans because they would smell like rotten eggs, and they were very poisonous and corrosive. No animal could live in it, and to visit, we would have to wear masks and suits just to look upon what once was beautiful.
What have we done? Catherine.
He spoke softly to my mom.
Lola,
He looked to me.
this picture tells us that there's a shutdown of the thermohaline circulation, which means that the Earth cannot function properly. It is no longer habitable at this time. It's time for us to go.
Tears streamed from our eyes, the freshest water, but no amount of tears could heal our planet. Money was now barely of any use. Luckily, my forward-thinking dad had already purchased tickets on the Acacia fleet as an insurance policy. One of Dad's old friends, who was now living on Koi 15, had offered my dad work. A house on Koi 15 would cost $1 million, so this job would secure the hefty mortgage. Dad had arranged this too. It was all we had, but unlike some, it was something. The next night we packed and made ready to leave. Dad had suggested our last days on Earth should be a keeper memory. We would travel by car, taking in the sights, spending the last time of terrestrial travel, traversing cross-country before we boarded the Acacia fleet. We were leaving Earth for good. Sobbing, my heart broke as I looked up at the moon, knowing I would never see its silvery glow again. The loch below glistened, but nothing stirred in its depths. In just over a year, home would have a different view, a new and strange landscape, along with 2 moons. It made me feel slightly hopeful for the future, a future where I could go to school once again. But would they teach us to learn from the past, so that we never made the same mistake again? I could only hope.
This is our fresh new day.